Avez-vous déjà observé un patient, vraiment observé, et réalisé que quelque chose en lui ne voulait pas être découvert? Nous aimons penser que la médecine est une science, propre, prévisible, que chaque maladie a un nom, chaque symptôme un schéma. Mais j'ai compris quelque chose de bien plus troublant, il existe encore des recoins du corps humain, et de l'esprit, qui résistent à toute définition. Je m'appelle Dr Henri Cordois, je suis médecin depuis 22 ans, et depuis 10 ans, je travaille en pathologie médico-légale, au bureau du médecin légiste du comté de Cook, à Chicago. J'ai pratiqué plus de 3000 autopsies. J'ai été consultant pour des enquêtes fédérales. J'ai diagnostiqué des infections post-mortem, si rares qu'elles ne font même pas l'objet d'études de cas. J'ai disséqué des corps gonflés au point d'être méconnaissables, brûlés, gelés, criblés de trous, qui ne correspondent à aucune arme que je connaisse. Mais ce cas, celui-ci a bouleversé ma réalité. 3 symptômes. Aucun d'eux ne devrait exister, mis ensemble, mis dans la même personne. Et pas avec cette fin. Tout a commencé par une enveloppe scellée, remise en main propre, pas d'adresse de retour, pas d'expéditeur indiqué, juste un post-it avec un seul mot écrit d'une écriture nette, épanché, urgent. Je me souviens que l'enveloppe était étrangement chaude. Pas chaude, chaude, comme une peau qui vient de lâcher de la fièvre. À l'intérieur se trouvait une photographie, une simple feuille de note médicale imprimée, et un ordre de transfert pour un corps. Patient, homme non inconnu, âge estimé, 24 ans. Aucun proche. Le décès est survenu à 3h17 du matin dans une cellule de détention, sous l'hôpital de réadaptation Sainte-Marie, un ancien établissement catholique, construit en... C'est la note au bas du formulaire de transfert qui a attiré mon attention. Elle était écrite à l'encre noire, visiblement ajoutée après l'impression du formulaire. Autopsie requise par arrêté de l'État. Suspicion d'infection, contamination possible. Ne pas entrer seul. J'aurais dû le signaler. J'aurais dû poser des questions. Au lieu de cela, j'ai signé les papiers d'admission. Et ce fut la dernière chose normale que j'ai faite, cette semaine-là. L'ambulance est arrivée à 6h42 juste avant le lever du soleil. 2 hommes ont transporté le corps dans un brancard de confinement hermétique, entièrement zippé, en plastique double couche, avec un joint d'étanchéité pour matière dangereuse. Cela aurait suffi à déclencher l'alarme, mais le véritable avertissement venait de leurs yeux. L'un des hommes, un secouriste trapu, le col trempé de sueur, refusait même de regarder le brancard tandis qu'il le transportait dans notre salle de réception. Il marmonnait sans cesse. Un seul mot, encore et encore. À coup fait, l'autre homme plus pâle et plus jeune, refusait d'enlever ses gants, même après lui avoir remis les papiers. Quand je lui ai demandé pourquoi, il a murmuré « Sa peau est encore chaude. Peu importe ce que dit le certificat de décès, cet homme n'était pas seul quand il est mort. » Dès leur départ, la température a chuté. Je ne veux pas dire qu'il faisait plus frais, je veux dire qu'il faisait plus frais. Je vérifiais le thermostat, toujours 20 degrés, mais je pouvais voir mon souffle. Chaque surface métallique était recouverte d'un fin voile de condensation. Même le sac mortuaire. C'est la première fois que j'ai hésité. Pas par peur, par confusion, parce que les corps ne rayonnent pas le froid comme ça. Pas quand ils viennent d'être déclarés morts. La température interne aurait dû être encore de 20. Pas assez de temps pour refroidir autant. J'ai ouvert lentement la fermeture éclair, m'attendant à la situation habituelle. Un cadavre standard, post-rigor, quelques signes de traumatisme. Mais ce que j'ai trouvé, c'est là que j'ai vu le premier symptôme. Ses yeux, elles étaient ouvertes, mais pas à la manière d'une bouche bée post-mortem. Elles étaient concentrées, et pas non plus d'un regard de mort fixe, et dilatées. Elles se déplaçaient rapidement, scrutant le plafond d'un côté à l'autre, comme s'il traquait quelque chose que je ne pouvais pas voir. Ce qui aurait été assez étrange en soi. Mais les pupilles, elles étaient en spirale, pas en contraction, pas en dilatation, en spirale. Je n'avais jamais vu ça chez un être humain vivant, et encore moins chez un cadavre. Je me suis penché, allumant instinctivement ma lampe stylo, et c'est à ce moment-là que les paupières se sont refermées, comme un réflexe. Le cadavre avait des réflexes. J'ai reculé si violemment que j'ai renversé le plateau chirurgical, et puis je l'ai entendu, un coup léger et rythmé, provenant de l'intérieur du mur derrière le brancard. 3 coups, puis le silence. Les lumières ont clignoté une fois, et la pièce s'est figée. C'est à ce moment-là que j'ai compris que ce n'était pas une autopsie normale. Ce n'était même pas une mort normale. C'était un avertissement. Je me suis dit que ce devait être une sorte de spasme musculaire, une décharge nerveuse, une énergie résiduelle dans les tissus. J'avais déjà vu des corps se contracter, mais ça, c'était coordonné, intentionnel, et ça ne s'est pas arrêté là. Lorsque j'ai commencé l'incision en nickel standard, quelque chose a dérapé dès que j'ai posé le scalpel sur sa peau. La résistance n'était pas celle à laquelle je m'attendais. C'était presque comme si le tissu était légèrement élastique, comme si on coupait du derme vivant, et non de la chair refroidie. Mais ce qui m'a vraiment retourné l'estomac, c'est ce que j'ai trouvé sous le sternum. Son cœur, il était intact, sans cicatrice, pas d'épaississement du myocarde, pas d'ischémie, mais c'est la couleur qui m'a fait reculer. Pas rouge, pas violet, c'était un bleu-gris terne. Like slate, and it was pulsing, not beating like a drum, just a slow, flexing, almost like it was trying to remember how. That was the second symptom, the impossible one. I grabbed the portable ECG scanner, checked the pads, ran the test 3 times. All zeros. No rhythm, no voltage, no cardiac activity. But the heart kept twitching, almost rhythmically, and then the lights flickered again. I checked the room temperature, still showing 6:28 on the monitor, but I could see frost forming at the edge of the steel table. My breath was fogging the visor of my face shield, and the knocking came again. But this time, it wasn't from the wall. It was from beneath the floor. 3 slow taps, then silence. I turned on the intercom and asked the night tech upstairs if they were doing maintenance. Static. I repeated the call twice. Nothing. When I stepped out into the hall, the temperature jumped back to normal within 2 paces. The air no longer bit at my fingers. I looked back into the room, and for a second I could swear the shadows inside were moving, shifting, like someone else was in there, but there was at least no one visible. That's when I decided I needed more information. I returned to the file that came with the body. I had ignored it at first, thinking it was boilerplate, medical standard. It wasn't. It was a single page, barely legible, as if someone had written it while shaking. Just 3 lines in shaky script. Do not attempt intubation. Do not monitor brain activity. Ask the priest about the 3rd symptom. I stared at that last line for a long time. I didn't know there was a priest involved, but I knew where to find him. Santa Maria, the old Catholic hospital, where the man had died, where apparently something else had survived. Santa Maria's rehabilitation hospital sits just west of the river, tucked between 2 high-rises like a forgotten relic. Most of the building has been condemned for years. Only the east wing remains operational, a geriatric psych unit and a chapel that hasn't held a mass in over a decade. I called ahead, said I needed to speak with someone about a recent death. They transferred me twice before I was told to come in person. When I arrived, the air outside the hospital was still too still. No traffic, no birds. The sky above was a pale grey that made the building's stained brick look like old bone. A security guard met me at the front desk, elderly with hands that trembled slightly. His name tag read up. "I'm looking for the priest assigned here," I said. Alan didn't respond right away, just gave me a long, weary look. Then said, "You sure about that? I wouldn't be here if I wasn't." He nodded slowly, then led me through a series of dim, echoing hallways to a side stairwell and down lower than I expected. Past the old pharmacy, past the original records archive, into what used to be the chapel quarters. The priest was already waiting. Father Matt, late 70s, maybe older, thin-framed, sharp-eyed, seated alone in a stone alcove that reeked of incense and mildew. He didn't stand when I entered, just stared at me, as if he already knew what I had come to ask. I explained what I had seen, the reflexes, the heart, the cold, the knocking. He listened without blinking, and then after a long pause he said something I'll never forget. There was a reason we kept him in the holding cell beneath the chapel. A reason the body never left this building while he was alive. I asked about the 3rd symptom. He shook his head. "You don't want to know. I need to know," I said. "I'm his examiner. I've seen things that..." "You've seen the heart move. You've seen the eyes track. But you haven't heard it yet." "Heard what?" He looked down, then slowly reached into the inside pocket of his cassock and pulled out a small battered tape recorder. "I wasn't supposed to keep this," he muttered, "but I needed someone else to hear it." He pressed play. At first I heard only silence. Then, breathing. And then a whisper. Not from the priest. Not from the man. It was a voice, whispering numbers. In Latin. A sequence. Repeated. Soft and clear. Imus. Duo. Tria. Inus. Duo. Tria. Inus. Duo. Tria. And then after a pause it said something else. Something that chilled me to the bone. 3 of flesh, 1 of soul. The body is not alone. The priest stopped the tape. "That," he said, "is your 3rd symptom." I didn't sleep that night. I left Santa Maria's with the priest's tape recorder still echoing in my ear. The voice didn't sound human. Not in the way voices are supposed to sound. It had depth, but no weight. Like it came from the inside of my own skull, vibrating something that had no name. I kept telling myself it was a trick. Auditory pareidolia. Sleep deprivation. Some old recording loop to spook new staff. But that didn't explain what happened when I got back to the office. The body was still on the table, sealed and tagged. No further analysis had been done. I entered the autopsy room, just past 11, clipboard in hand, intending to re-examine the tissue samples and prep for tox screen. But the moment I opened the door, the air shifted. The lights were dimmer, though the switches hadn't changed. The chill was back, localized, heavy. My fingers stiffened almost immediately. I reached for my pen and dropped it. It hit the floor with a sound that echoed like a gunshot. And then came the whisper, not from the tape, from the body. Same rhythm, same cadence. Anus, duo, tria. I froze. The mouth hadn't moved, but the sound, it came from within the sealed cavity. I stepped closer, knees locked, heart hammering. I stared at the lips, then the chest. Nothing, no rise, no fall. Just that feeling, like I was being watched from the inside out. I leaned closer, trying to confirm the direction of the sound. Was it the air duct? A malfunctioning recorder? No, it was coming from the throat. That's when I noticed it. A sliver of something lodged deep in the back of the upper palate, near the uvula. A thin, almost metallic glint. I grabbed the light, and forceps, and gently pried it free. It wasn't bone. It wasn't metal. It was glass, a fragment of a shattered lens, like a monocular or microscope slide, smooth on one side, etched on the other, etched with 3 interlocking circles, and inside each, a different organ, heart, eye, tongue, and beneath them, etched in surgical Latin, non solus sum, I am not alone. And the moment I touched it, every screen in the room shut off. The only sound left was the knock, 3 times, from inside the morgue fridge. But the body wasn't in the fridge. It was on the table. I woke up in the break room. I don't remember walking there. I don't remember sitting down. But I remember the time, 2:46 a.m. My wristwatch was still ticking. My coat was on. My phone battery was dead, completely drained, despite being at 87%, just 2 hours earlier. And when I opened the door to the hallway, the overhead lights were only the emergency strips buzzed faintly, casting the corridor in that sickly green hue that makes everything look underwater. Something was wrong. I hurried back to the autopsy room. The door was ajar. The table where the body had been, the bag, unzipped, opened like someone had calmly stepped out of it. No blood, no dragging marks. Just a faint outline of pressure on the stainless steel, like someone had lain there for hours, and then risen. I checked the fridge. Nothing. Panic began to claw up to the back of my throat. Not the irrational kind, but the deeply clinical kind. The kind that whispers, this should not be possible. This breaks protocol. This breaks physics. Then I saw the tape recorder. It wasn't where I left it in my coat pocket. It was on the floor beside the sink, and it was playing. Only this time, there weren't numbers, just a voice. One voice, repeating one sentence, over and over. He's looking for his third, over and over again, slower each time, until the batteries finally died mid-sentence. He's looking for his... I stared at the body bag. It had moved, shifted by maybe 2 inches, since I entered. I approached it slowly, as though it might react, and that's when I saw what was lying inside the folds. Not bone, not tissue, but another glass fragment. Identical etching. But this one was cracked, and instead of non solus sum, it bore a single word. Exchange. That's when I realized what I'd been missing. The body hadn't left the building. It had moved itself. And it was looking for a third piece, a third host, and I had already touched. The rest of the staff started arriving at 6:30 a.m. I said nothing. What could I say? That the corpse had vanished for 3 hours, and left behind cryptic glass fragments, etched in Latin, that it had whispered numbers, and climbed off the autopsy table without any muscle activity. I told them I'd completed the preliminary, that I was preparing the report, but I didn't file anything. Instead, I went down to records, basement level, older than the rest of the facility, cold, damp, and somehow, quieter than it should have been. I requested prior incident logs, involving Maria's and anything involving contaminated cadavers, vocal emissions post-mortem, or unusual anatomical anomalies. The clerk raised an eyebrow, then handed me a dusty file, one that hadn't been touched in over a decade. Back room, she said. You'll want Dr. Pathology. No, archive consulting. He only comes in once a week. Dr. Patel was in his 80s. Thin, glasses like antique bottle bottoms. He sat in the corner under a flickering bulb, reading a leather-bound book without a title. When I told him what I'd seen, what the corpse had done, he didn't ask for proof. He didn't even blink. 3 symptoms, he said. You've seen 2. Eye movement. Cardiac reflex. He nodded. And you heard the voice. I paused. Yeah. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the drawer, and pulled out a file, yellowed with age, marked St. Maria's case envelope. Inside the file, photos, logs, and diagrams of another cadaver with spiral pupils and a beating heart. Decades ago. Same 3 Latin phrases. Same glass fragment. Same symbol. Except this body had a foot mark etched into the sternum. This brand sealed directly into the flesh with surgical precision. 3 circles, 3 organs, and one more shape emerging from their center. A hand, open, palm facing outward. Below it, handwritten, shaky script. The soul was not his. It was only on loan. I asked Patel what happened to that body. He hesitated, then whispered. It returned itself to the chapel crypt, on foot. My stomach dropped. Returned itself. He met my eyes. You don't understand. This isn't about medicine. It never was. It's about invitation. That's when I remembered something. The first file, the one in the envelope. The sticky note on the front hadn't said urgent. It had said open. I didn't go home that night. I went back to St. Maria's. It was irrational. I knew that. But something in me had shifted. Some boundary between caution and obsession had dissolved. I needed to see the place where the man died, where whatever this was had begun. The night security guard didn't recognize me, probably a different shift than the one from before. I showed him my Cook County credentials and said I needed to inspect the holding cell under the chapel for forensic documentation. He didn't even ask for clarification, just handed me a flashlight and said if the lights go out, don't move. That was the only warning he gave me. I descended the narrow stairwell beneath the eastern wing toward the old crypt level. The architecture changed as I moved deeper. Tile turned to stone, plaster to brick, fluorescent to flickering incandescence. The walls were damp and strangely warm to the touch, and the air, it smelled like burned salt. I reached the end of the hallway and opened the rusted door into the holding cell. It wasn't like any hospital room I'd ever seen. No bedding, no medical equipment, just a chair, chains, and a painted circle on the floor, faded, cracked, and in the center of the circle a pile of ash. I scanned the walls and saw it. The third symptom. It was written in soot across the back wall. He speaks through those who no longer dream. At first I thought it was metaphor. Then I remembered the tape, the whisper that repeated through the corpse, and then I felt a presence. The lights went out. Instant. Total. The silence that followed wasn't silent at all. It was full of breathing. Not mine. Close. Not around me. Inside me. And then, slowly a faint red glow filled the space, like backlit smoke. It came from the circle, and from within that glow, I heard something that will follow me until I die. A voice, not the whisper this time, but clear mocking. It said, "You have touched the eyes. You have touched the heart. Now give me the tongue." The door behind me slammed shut, and all I could do was scream, but no sound came out. I don't know how I got out. One moment I was standing in the chapel's sub-basement, throat locked tight, red light filling the room like a blood fog, and the next I was lying on my back in the hospital's courtyard, staring up at the night sky. My watch read 4:44 a.m., nearly 2 hours unaccounted for. My coat was gone, so was the second glass fragment. But something else had changed. When I spoke just to test my voice, whisper anything, I heard a delay, like my words echoed from somewhere else. A full second later, behind me, beside me, inside, I made my way back to my car, hands shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice. As I sat in the driver's seat, the passenger radio kicked on by itself, dead static, and beneath it, a voice, my voice, repeating what I'd just said, word for word, but in reverse. I turned it off, pulled the battery, yanked the fuse. Nothing stopped it. The voice didn't mock. It didn't threaten. It practiced, like something was rehearsing how to be me. By the time I made it home, if you can call it that, I couldn't bring myself to look in the mirror. Every time I caught my reflection, I thought I saw a second face flicker behind mine. A half-beat delayed. The same features, wrong expression. I tried to sleep, but at 3:17 a.m., I woke up gasping. My mouth was wide open, my jaw, and lying on my pillow, just inches from my face, was the third fragment. It wasn't broken like the others. It was whole, and instead of Latin, it bore a simple English phrase etched into its center. Exchange complete. And that's when the whisper returned, louder this time, clear, but it didn't come from the walls, or the radio. It came from my own throat, in a voice that wasn't mine. It said, "Free of flesh, one of soul. The door is now remembered." I didn't go back to work. I couldn't. Not after what had been put inside me. For days, I locked myself in my apartment, windows sealed, mirrors covered. I disconnected every piece of tech. No phone, no computer. But it didn't matter. The voice was inside now. Not constant, not loud, but present, like a cough building in your lungs, or the tick of a clock you can't locate. Always there, just under the surface, rehearsed. Repeating, and always in threes. 3 marks on my bedroom wall. 3 flickers of the light before it died. 3 whispered syllables that echoed through my jaw when I tried to speak. I began to understand. The symptoms were never symptoms. They were steps. The eyes, they let it see. The heart, it gave it rhythm. And the voice gave it permission. It never needed the whole body. It just needed a body it could borrow. Mine. The priest was right. The soul was only ever unknown. And I was late returning it. I finally opened the last file Patella gave me, a sealed envelope. He had pressed into my hand before I left, saying only, "If you hear the third voice, burn this." I hadn't. Until now. Inside were old photographs, pages torn from a journal, and the final document labeled Symptôme fait, classified, post-integration. The page showed images of a person, unidentifiable, distorted, half in, half out of shadow. The caption read, "Phase complete. Host, subject remains unaware of third occupation. Symptoms include sleepwalking, dissociative speech, mirror anomalies." That last line hit me like a syringe to the spine, because I hadn't looked in the mirror in over 4 days. I tore the sheet away from the lamp and stared into the glass. And for the briefest, most paralyzing moment, it blinked before I did. That was the final truth. The twist that broke me. It wasn't looking for me. It had already found me. And I had let it in. Closing thought. Catharsis. I used to believe in clean diagnoses, rational explanation, the safety of routine, of clinical distance. but not anymore. Now I check my pulse every morning. I speak out loud to hear if it echoes. And at night, I sleep with my mouth taped shut. Because if it finds a way to speak again, not through me, but as me, then someone else will open the door. And next time, they won't be able to close.